who is the track chair of VLSI and Embedded Systems. Dr. Manish S. is working as assistant professor in the Department of Electronics, Cochin University of Science and Technology. Dr. Manish took his BTech in Electronics and Communication Engineering from NIT Calicut, MTech in Integrated Electronics and Circuits from IIT Delhi, and PhD in High Performance Reconfigurable Architecture from IISc Bangalore. He is a very versatile researcher, and his research interests include VLSI design, FPGA-based system design, digital system design and verification, reconfigurable architectures, ESP architectures, machine learning, and many more. He has authored several papers in reputed international journals and conferences. I welcome you, sir, to this talk.
Our first presentation is by paper ID ICAACQ_12 by the title Implementation of AES to Encrypt and Decrypt Speech using LUT with Mux gates. The author of the presentation is Kezia Teresa Augustine and Purushottam Yu.
Next.
Our next author is by paper ID ICACC_59 by the title Network on Chip Routers for Efficient Data Flow Computing, a survey, and the author is Ashish John, Yosna Via, and Piyush Purushottam.
Yes, it is being webcasted.
So good afternoon, judges. So today I'm going to do my presentation on my paper, network on chip routers for efficient data flow computing, a server. So now moving on to my outline of my paper. So I'll just start again. So good afternoon, judges. So today I'm going to do my presentation on my topic on my paper, network on chip routers for efficient data flow computing, a survey. So now moving on to the outline of my paper. So this paper is basically a survey paper, kind of a survey paper or paper, where we are basically studying and surveying about different routers that are present in data flow architecture, and also using the idea or concept of NOC, that is network on chip. So this paper basically has two parts. The first part is basically we just introduce the basic concepts of data flow architecture, what is NOC, what is SOC, etc. And then we move on to the router design part. Like we talk about mainly three routers, and we end with the summary of the routers. So now moving on to the first part. So introduction. So in this modern era, consisting of differing domains in computer science like IoT, blockchain, AI, all of this require high computing power, especially high performance, high processing power, high computing power. And all of them, also the modern era asks for something that is very small, something very large scale integrated. So we come to a better source, what is called as a system on chip. So what is a system on chip is basically, it is a system that is integrated on a chip. So it has a lot, like if you see in the figure, it has a lot of things like IP blocks, which is called as intellectual property blocks. And these intellectual property blocks have specific functions like memory management, etc. Now it is obvious to understand that if they need to have, in order for the system to have a good communication, good performance, what I mean to say, is that it should have what is called good communication between the blocks, like the IP blocks. And one of the main communication framework which was used was called as a bus-based systems. So the bus-based system, as you can see, but this bus-based system had a lot of disadvantages. Like it had, what we call, it had high operating frequency. It had problems like, what can you say? It cannot be scaled to higher dimensions. It cannot be had electrical degradation, a lot of factors like that. So we looked into some another alternative. What is an alternative? It is network on chip. So the network on chip is basically a communication framework which consists of a lot of router-based packet switching technique. Okay. So here what happens is that this from the source router, the packet is routed to the destination router. So kind of a packet switching technique. Okay. So why do we use this? So one of the main features is because main components in NOC is network topology. So what is the network topology? Is that network topology is the underlying skeleton of the network on chip. So it is important for communication efficiency and all. And the next component is the NOC architecture, which consists of different components. There is mainly three components, that is network interface, processing elements, and the routing elements. Okay, so routing elements, which is routers itself. And then we come to the routing algorithm. So what is the routing algorithm? It is basically the algorithm which is used for routing a particular packet from the source to the destination router. So we need a good algorithm. And the fourth component is flow control. The flow control stands for what is like how the packets are stored in the router. So it can be stored either in a packet way. The packet way means we are not splitting that data or packet. In the case of flip buffer control, we are splitting that packet into smaller components. So now we move on to the next concept, that is data flow architecture. Okay. So in the modern, in the current operating systems and computers, they work on the principle of what is called control flow architecture. So this control flow architecture, how it works is that we have a process, and it is a process-oriented architecture. That is what I mean to say. So in this particular process is executed, it moves on to the next one, it moves on to the next one. It works like that. Okay, but in the case of our paper, we move on to what is called as a data flow architecture. Okay, so data flow architecture, what is the importance of that? It is a data-oriented mechanism. That means that we have we can manipulate the data, we can split it, merge it, and a lot of things can happen. Okay, so we move on to this is the underlying principle which we follow in this paper. Okay, so now we coming on to this paper, we basically deal with this data flow processing unit, which is the underlying architecture in our paper. So here, like we are only concerned about what is called as a data flow accelerator, which consists of a lot of processing elements, okay, which are embedded into this NOC. Okay, so and in this PE, we consist of a router, and we are moving on to the design of routers. So now, when we look into the literature survey, we can understand that there are a lot of lot of routers which are designed by people in various academic institutions. Okay, they are very efficient in processing everything. But when we look into data flow architecture, there is a certain limitation or constraint. The reason is because data flow architecture requires what is first of all it requires what is called multicasting. Okay, multicasting means it needs to have simultaneous routing of packets to multiple destinations. That is the first thing it needs. Second thing is that this NOC is very much congested. Network injection rate is high. Okay, so we cannot use a simple router which is used in a particular literature and use it for our architecture because it doesn't work. So the first basic router which we are discussing is what is called the baseline router or the basic router. Okay, here it consists of certain this is called as input router. So this is a router we have to say, and basically a packet which comes to this direction, it gets stored in the input buffer queue. From there, it is routed non-procedural form. Okay, but this router is very inefficient. The first reason is because it follows what is called as a flip-based control. So why is flip-based flow control very bad? So like I said before, we have high congestion in the network, and this congestion, if we are dividing into subsequent flips, smaller components, it will lead to higher congestion. It will lead to performance degradation. Second reason is because there is a high packet delay also, which is occurring in this entire architecture. So we are moving on to another router, which tries to solve some of the problems which are present in the earlier router, and that is what is called as the multicast router with output buffer. So this router. First of all, it doesn't use any flip-based system, so congestion is reduced at that point. And also, we use what is called output buffer. So here, when a packet comes, if it is pointing to multiple destinations, it directly goes to that specific output buffer, and it gets routed to specific destination. So we have, and also we follow a particular splitting pattern. Okay, this is also very followed in this router. But still, this router is not very efficient and considered in NOC because it has a lot of problems. First of all, when we look into this, we can understand that there are a lot of buffer units. So it is wastage of memory, like a lot of memory is getting wasted and a lot of memory is getting used up. So we need some more better router. Okay, so what is the next router which can come to? So like I said before, the earlier router had a problem with buffer utilization. So we try to solve it. How can we solve it? We try to use what is called a shared buffer. So shared buffer is basically router comes. We all have output buffers here, but this output buffers are only storing bit values. We are not storing any data, nothing. But a shared buffer, it stores the entire thing. And it is just, from here, it just routes based on the packet buffer and everything, and it gets normally routed to the specific destination. So, now basically, this is the three routers that I wanted to explain. So these three routers, basically, this is the summary of the three routers which I wanted to say. Okay, so three routers summary, just 5 features that I looked upon. So what am I concluding based upon? So if you carefully closely look into all these three routers, we can have a hierarchical, we follow a hierarchical transition. What I mean to say is that one router is there, the other router is better than the second router, and we follow hierarchical order. And also, we find that the third router has the high instruction per cycle. That what I mean to say is that instruction execution is very high. Also, buffer utilization is very high. And also, we find that this router has also low energy consumption. So now moving on to the first slide, what I said, we need high power computation, we need high energy consumption, low energy consumption, what I would say. So we need to have that, we need to have a router which takes less amount of energy and high computation. So efficient computing power can be achieved by providing the routers. So with this, I am ending my presentation. Yeah.
ഒരു ഫോട്ടോ മൊബൈൽ അങ്ങനെ സെറ്റിംഗ്സ് ലൊക്കേഷൻ പോയി
Yes, but basically the first paper that I created had 10 pages in it, but I wanted.
Yes, that's what I'm saying is the mark and the speed. The mark. So the next thing is you said something about condition. What is condition?
So basically, what I mean to say is that for example, traffic congestion itself, like there's a deadlock kind of situation. Because first of all, data flow architecture it has high condition because lot of number of processing units are there. So they do processing on all these data packets. Okay. So simultaneously it is distributed. So simultaneously they are sending data one by one through the network. So flip based, what happens is that a packet is getting split into different smaller components. So automatically, for example, if the condition is supposing let us say X value, it will become 5 times because what happens if you are splitting into 5 packets, it will have lead to higher congestion. And width of the packet will be there. That is a issue which we solved, but this is the best which we can come up.
You have any numbers saying like how much of area is multicast router with output and how much of area shared
We basically didn't look into the area as much. We looked into the
area power.
it's an evaluation page here.
Yeah, probably so that also is some idea how to cover.
Okay, sir. Thanks.
The next presentation is by the paper ICACC 12 by the title Implementation of AES Detective and Agent Speech using LUT with Touch Stage by the authors Adrian Teresa Augustine and Pushottam.
Hello.
Yung 20 minutes na lang ito. 20 minutes na lang ito.
Myself, Kezia Teresa Augustine. I will be presenting the paper implementation of AES to encrypt and decrypt speech using LUT plus. So this paper is basically based on cryptography. Cryptography is a technique used to protect our information or data using certain tools. So that the data that is sent from one place to another place so that the information that is sent from one place to another place can only be read or used by the persons that in this paper, we will be implementing an efficient system to encrypt and decrypt the data. Here, the data in this paper that we have used is speech signal. The algorithm that we have used for encrypting or decrypting speech is AES algorithm. Here in AES, there is an important unit called SBox, which affects the performance of the system. Here, the new implementation that we have done is we have changed the architecture of SBox that is being used in AES. The SBox is implemented using LUT with MUX. From the literature review, many people have done here since I have used speech signal. Pre-processing of speech is kind of very important for the for improving the performance of the system. So for that, many methods have been implemented previously, and from that, short time based methods have been found to be very efficient. And when considering symmetric key and asymmetric key cryptography, symmetric key is used for low power applications when we have to send like long messages and all. And among the symmetric key cryptographic ciphers, AES has been found to be AES is preferred because of its high throughput. Now, this is the basic block diagram of the system. We have two units, a sender unit and a receiver unit. In the sender unit, we have our original data, which is the speech signal. The speech signal is first pre-processed using a MATLAB. Then the pre-processed signal is sent to an encryption unit where it is encrypted. The encrypted data is sent to the receiver, where first it gets decrypted using a decryption unit, and it is reconstructed back to get our original signal. First, as I mentioned before, the first stage is speech processing. So why we need speech processing is because, like, if you take a speech waveform, there is like mainly three segments: a voiced part, unvoiced part, and a silence part. So majority of the data that the speaker communicates resides in this voiced part. So if we send a speech to a software, the software is only communicating only the needs only the voice part. So for segregating the voice part from the unvoiced part, we use the technique of pre-processing. Here in this paper, we have used short time zero crossing rate method. This is the basic flow of how we have done the zero crossing method. This has been implemented in MATLAB. First, we will take the speech as input. We will divide the speech into equal frames and find the zero crossing rate, that is ZCR, of each frame. And then we check if the ZCR of the ith frame is less than or equal to 0.1. If it is less than or equal to 0.1, then we retain the frame. If it is greater, then we discard the frame. Then at last, all the retained frame are plugged together to get our pre-processed signal. This is the MATLAB output that we have obtained. And as you can see on the left side, the blue waveform is our original speech signal. And on the right side, first figure shows the original speech signal along with the ZCR. So here it is evident that the speech, wherever voice speech is there, the ZCR rate is very low compared to the unvoiced or silence part. So what we do is, after applying the threshold, we remove the unvoiced and silence part. So finally we get our in color pre-processed signal. Now, once the speech is pre-processed, we send it to the encryption unit, cryptographic unit, where we have used AES algorithm. AES means Advanced Encryption Standard. This is a symmetric block cipher, and it supports block length of 128 bit and key length of 128, 192, or 256 bit. Here in this paper, I am using block length and key length of 128 bits. So the number of rounds that are required is also 10 rounds. Here in each round, in the AES in each round, we have basically 4 stages: subbyte, shift round, mixed column, and add round B. This 4 stages have been repeated for 10 rounds. The first, in each round, the first stage is the add round B. In add round B, what happens is we have two inputs. that is a 128-bit data and 128-bit key. These two inputs are XOR to get our new updated state array. This updated state array is sent to the next stage, which is the substitution byte stage, where each element of the state array is substituted using a certain value from the SBox unit. This is where we have implemented our new architecture. In conventional XCODE, what happens is we have basically mainly two blocks, which is multiplication, inversion, and append transformation. These multiplication inversion blocks consist of a series of operations such as mapping, squaring, summing, and multiplication. All these processes kind of like delivers a huge amount of power. So when a third party tries to decode the data that is being sent, by analyzing the power that is dissipated from the SBox, we are able to decode the message. So in order to mitigate this, what we have done is we have changed the architecture of SBox, and here what we have done is we have created a LUT 256 byte LUT where we have stored the values that are required for substitution, and using a mux logic we get the required values. Now once the state array is updated, we then transfer it to the next stage, which is a shift row state, wherein I throw is shifted I position to the left. That is 0th row is shifted 0 times. First row is shifted 1 time. Similarly, second and third. Then once we get this updated array, we go to the next stage, which is the mixed column stage. Wherein in mixed column we have a predefined matrix. We multiply this matrix with our updated state array to get a new array. This is the whole process of encryption, and this process repeated in the reverse order is our decryption process. And after all these implementation has been done in Xilinx Vivado, and this is the simulation result that we have obtained. And from the simulation results, it's like this is the encryption of conventional AES and proposed AES. The output is similar. Only difference is that the number of clock cycles required, that means how faster the output we get is better for the proposed AES. Like almost delay has been reduced by 30%. The decryption output. And coming to the synthesis results, is also obtained from the Vivado software. The resource utilized for encryption process is reduced by 20%. And in the case of decryption process, it is reduced by 40%. Now to conclude the paper, we have been able to implement an efficient system that is better compared to the conventional system in terms of delay and area. And further, this can be studied on by varying the k-length of AES. Then the delay can all be further increased by applying pipeline techniques. So the references.
Both the encryption and decryption meet the report. We are implemented a complete algorithm.
Yeah.
Both
Yeah, but found out.
The resource utilization
Yeah.
for that.
Well,
And they are able to check that.
no, actually, it's only so
The other part is
the pre-processing part and everything is in MATLAB.
and both the elements
Yeah.
basically instead of doing all these operations.
Yeah. In LUT. So like the resource utilization has been reduced.
And how much was the resource?
Speed, like according to our program which we did, for the in case of encryption, it was like almost like there was a difference of 10 clock cycles. Clock period, one clock period is same, 10 times. Thank you.
Hello.
Hello, sir.
Hello. Hello.
Hello.
Please tell me your name.
Sir, myself Lakshmi Nair.
Okay, please present the assessment.
Okay, sure, sir. Hello. Am I
Okay.
audible? Am I audible? Yes. Okay. So my project is design of ESD protection circuit for an LNA using 65 nanometer CMOS technologies. So the outlines that I gone through we've gone through this presentations are the project objectives and the system models, the use of inductors in the design, and the flowcharts and the results. Okay. So while we get into the project objective, the focus of this work is to design an ESD protection at 60 gigahertz, the LNA in 65 nanometer CMOS technology. Okay. Here the main concept is that ESD protection. So ESD discharge has become a most critical. Okay, the ESD has become one of the most critical and reliable issues in the integrated circuits. So here we are going through some of the things, and we are implemented some designs for reducing the critical things that are facing by the ICs. Okay, so the dimension of the ESD protection devices is reduced by using the double diode here. In turn, it will be decreases the parasitic capacitance, and also indirectly it will be increases the resistance. So these are the problems that I am seeing. Okay, so which will increase the reduction levels of the parasitic impedance of the ESD protection diodes, which may leads to the RF performance reductions. So when we get into the some designs, we are facing some problems. So these are the problems when we are increasing some that is by increasing the reduction levels, that is while we are increasing the diodes. So the diode size will be mainly depending upon the whole designs. Okay, so the continuous scaling of these technologies and the introduction of new design concepts and materials and mainstream the CMOS technologies will brought in new ESD challenges. Okay, so here in order to improve the performance, we are introducing a custom designed ESD protection circuits, as well as we designed an LNA circuit that is 60 gigahertz. Okay, so the system model. So how the ESD works and which all things we have to get to know about the ESDs happening in an ICs. Okay, so here we can see that in ESD protection diodes, mainly here we are using the P type and N type. Okay, so under the positive to VDD mode, that is PD mode, here it is shown, right? So in that case, and the negative to VSS mode, that is NS mode, the ESD stress, that is ESD current is discharging through the forward biased DP or DN respectively. Okay, then for the case of avoiding the breakdown conditions, so the positive to VSS mode as well as the negative to VDD modes, that is ND and ND as well as PS modes, we are using a clamp circuit, power clamp circuit. So here we won't get into the power clamp circuit. We are only focusing about the ESD protection circuits, which are mainly used for the reduction of dimension, as well as through which we can reduce the parasitic capacitance and also decreases the resistance. Okay, so here we are using an inductor in the design. So the design which will be mainly to mitigate the performance degradation caused by the ESD protection devices, and some designs design techniques had been developed to reduce the parasitic capacitance, as I said before. So the main thing that we come across this design is the parasitic capacitance. For that, we are moving to a reliable design, that is ESD protection device. Okay, so the parasitic capacitance of ESD protection devices can be turned out by using the inductors. So the ESD protection design, which are mainly used with inductor as well as capacitors. Okay, so for that I move to then a single capacitor spiral, removing the capacitance by capacitor, that is lump component, that is capacitor, and providing a spiral inductors. Okay, so the ESD protection circuits is needed for all the input and output pads of the for protecting the ICs and ESD stresses, and mainly this phenomena is happened in a short period so of time with a current that will strike say several amperes. Okay, so a large protection circuit is needed to enhance this voltage and current robustness of a ESD protection. So for that only we are constructing these circuits. So by using a large protection circuit in the parasitic, the capacitance become large, as well as the RF performance will affect the in a significant ways. Okay, so that will be under the positive to VDD I explained before. It will be during the ESD swapping that the input port, that is ESD, will switch on to provide a discharging path through a P diode, as well as it will conduct the ESD current into the VDD. Okay, so this will be happened here. And also we are using mainly during the normal working conditions, the inductors in series with the capacitors can limit the DC leakages. So that leakage path from the input to the ground or VSS has the circuit I shown before. So and they can also utilizes the resonance to low frequencies. Okay, so the inductor that leads to an impedance whenever the frequency is higher than the resonance frequency on the inductor and the capacitor. So as a result, a series inductor and a capacitor have been placed with the spiral inductor. Okay, so that spiral inductor will be acting as a capacitor as well as an inductor with a margin of frequencies. Okay, based on the self resonance frequency of the spiral inductors. So the flow diagram that is for the design of inductor is shown here. So in the flow diagram, we can see that the requirements the requirements which all we need for the working of an for our system. That is mainly here the requirements of the geometrical constructions that I made as the technical approaches are not done. The done is by the providing a design way. Okay, so I use HFSS and HFSS for the designing of inductor. So here main thing, the because of the defect of silicon substrate such as occurs in the future that will be yield to a low frequencies, that estimate for a very experimental circuit designs. Okay, the 4 characteristics geometrical parameters for the spiral inductors such as number of turns, which will depends, as well as width, spacing, and the spacing of the turns, as well as the outer diameter and the range of inductance from about 0.1 nanohenry to 5 nanohenry. Okay, so the other structural parameters or the structural properties I gone through were the degree of turn, width, and the spacing, the outer surface diameter also. So here an equivalent circuit that is RLQ that I shown here. Here, mainly due to the resonance of the metal sheets which is used in the inductor have its own resistance, which will be given as RS. Okay, so that RS is given here. Then the inductor and the resistance of the spiral inductor in series. Okay, then in case of the spiral inductor, the L1 that is here, L1 and L2, that will be the pointing endpoints, that is to end of the inductor, which will be an input as well as output. Okay, so each layer will be having its own oxide, that is each layer, that is the oxide, there will be a capacity oxide and a resistance oxide, that will be as well as in the substrate also, this both will be done. Okay, so because of the construction difference of the output port of the inductor inside a spiral inductor, which will be stretched outward, so the structure here shown here, so it will be stretched outward, right? So while it is spiral inductor is designed, the endpoint, that is other endpoint will be inside the spiral inductors. So while we are stretching out, it will be phase, or it will be gone through some capacitor as well as resistance with the substrate as well as the oxide layers. So that was shown here. Okay, so the work I done here are the double diode simulations and the simulation of double diode with an LC circuit, that is from the base paper that I took for a reference, that is LC, that is by using inductor as well as capacitor, and by using the HFSS only I replace the inductor and the capacitor by a spiral inductor structure, and the simulation of ESD protection circuit in a custom designed inductor is done, and a design of LNA is done here, as well as the simulation of LNA with LC as well as custom designed inductor designed ESD protection circuit is simulated, and analyzes and tests and compare with the references are done. Okay, so here this one is the inductor output, that is for the case of inductance as well as the quantified Q factors. So based on the reference, that is reference frequencies, that is we are taking here as a 70. So based on that only it will be acting as an inductor as well as a capacitor. Okay, so this one is the LC as well as the spiral inductor. I constructed this one. This is already implemented or implemented, but I changed the value and simulated. And the thing with the spiral inductors was the design which with my spiral inductor is my design. That is, I in the place of inductor as well as capacitor, I kept in a spiral inductor structure. By it will be reducing the space as well as the parasitic capacitance by capacitors. Okay, capacitors in the LC. So this one is design of LNA circuit. So the LNA circuit in which mainly we are going through some that is I will explain the each and every LNA designs, that is MOSFETs we are using. So here LS1 and this is LG1 and LG2 is the gate inductor, which will be mainly setting the resonance frequency at gigahertz, 60 gigahertz. For that only we are using this LG1 and LG1. Okay, then the LS1 and LS2. These two source inductors mainly used to match the input impedance. The M1, M3 as well as the M6. These both will be as a distorting transistors that makes a current mirror along with the M1 and M4. Okay, then CL is the optimizing output to increase the intensity of and also it will act as a spectrum noise reducer. And LD1 and LD2, that is load inductors. Then M2 and M5, these two will be calibrating intake of isolate, and also it will be lowers the influence of Miller capacitance, that is EGD. Then CB1 and CB2, mainly the capacitors that are DC obstructing capacitors to minimal the reacting power at the 60 gigahertz. So these are the values that I used for the design. So by using the LNA design, I simulated the output and the noise figure. This is the graph which is shown here. That is the simulation of S parameter as well as the noise figure for the circuit. So here I obtained the S parameters as well as noise figures according to the requirement, and also when we compare with the references, it will be much better results I am getting. Then here we can see the comparison. Okay, the comparison of ESD protection circuit and without custom design inductor. Okay, so for that case, the parameters we have used are S21, that is forward voltage gain, the S11, that is for voltage reflection coefficients, and S12 reverse voltage gain, and S22, that is at the output port voltage, that is will be reflecting coefficients. Okay, so here the LNA without ESD, LNA with ESD LC circuit, that is already, as I told you that told the team that it is the base paper design, but the design I change with the values only. Okay, that one, and as well as the custom designed inductor, that is my design. Okay, so here we can see that S21 it is changing, that is voltage, the forward voltage is increasing much higher with a positive value, and S11 also. Here the power that is taken for everything is 20 milliwatt. So these are the comparison, and the final circuit I implemented of ESD protection circuit for LNA, that is the ESD protection circuit, the LNA circuit. So here we didn't get into the power clamp circuits, we are just gone through the ESD protection circuit as well as the design of LNAs. So the output, the results, which is for the ESD protection circuits with and without the custom designed inductor. So we can here see the comparisons that through the graph. So here we can see that in the table format itself, we can see that, right? So using the custom designed inductor as well as the LC circuit, the difference in it is much higher. Mainly which will be work as a V-band frequencies, and the design of spiral inductor whose interest is 60 gigahertz. So the spiral inductor also the design was done in the ANSYS HFSS, and the other designs were all done in the ADS. Then the second stage of the two stages are there, two-stage LNA circuits are designed. So the gain has 37.9 dB as well as the noise figure 2.4, and the power is 20 milliwatt. The combination circuits of LNA having the ESD protection circuit with a custom designed inductor is designed in ADS, and the gain is 37.5 and noise figure is 2.5. So that is the custom designed inductors values, and here the circuit is evaluated in much lower CMOS technologies. That is here we are using 65 nanometer, but it can be reduced. So we are for the future scopes of these projects are by reducing the by reducing the technologies, how the design will be variations happens in the designs. So that is the future scope for the project. So these are the reference. Thank you.
Thank you. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So can you go to that comparison?
Yes, sir.
Can
Yes,
you
sir.
tell,
Yes.
like, how you what is the alternative with custom design injector as these?
So here I compared with the LNA without an ESD protection circuit. So we know that if an ESD protection circuit is or if an ESD is happen or strikes, it will face some problems or the damage of ICs can be happen, right? So without an ESD protection circuit, the normal operations, then the LNA for particular LNA that I designed is working in the this all the parameters that I given here. The values are this one. So for the case of S21, if my LNA working without an ESD protection circuit, then it will be having a 37.9. That is S11, that is forward voltage reflection coefficient. That is yes, sir.
Yeah, so you mean to say that with the ESP circuit also?
Yes, yes. Yes, yes, yes.
And what about this linearity? It's not important.
Yes, sir. Linearity is much important thing that we have to look into. The thing is that while I was working, it was in COVID situations, right? So the tools that we used was not much deeper or a correct or a it's corrected only, but the ADS have some restrictions, right? So while we are using a synopsis or a cadence, we have for a circuit or designing of circuits, we will get much more.
Yeah, that's because have you like do some parametric analysis and extracted the parametric
Yes.
parametric
Yes, sir.
capacitors? That have you done?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Have capacitors, right? So that only.
Yes, yes, yes. By using as I told before, now for the case of lumped component, while we are using for the circuit, we will face an parasitic capacitance, because the capacitance value is capacitance, lumped capacitance is given here, so it will be facing some parasitic capacitance. So by that, by switching that to a spiral inductor, we are reducing the parasitic capacitance.
Yeah, my question was more onto the LNA side. So basically,
LNA. Oh, okay, okay.
The use of the LNA, you will have all these additional parasitic. So probably you might have to check the impact of those parasitics with the ESP also.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
Yes,
all.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Hello. Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you. So we get that.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Our next presentation is by the paper ID ICACC82 by the title Scale Space Variable Gate Element at VHEL by the authors Nalarina Rupika, Mohan M, Chow Bino, P.H. Sanjana, and Kartika Balavan. The presentation will be held on.
Hello, Sajana.
Hello.
Sajana.
Sir, this is Rupika. I'll be presenting.
Okay.
I think you people can view my screen, right?
Yes, you can start.
Yeah. Hello everyone. Today we are here to present our project CMOS-based variable gain LNA at VBAN. So the team members are Mohit, Rupika, Sanjna, Vinod, and Kartika Balmurugan as said. And so the overview of our total PPT would be introduction, objectives, methodology, contribution, experimentation results, and conclusion. Firstly, introduction. So why did we go for 60 gigahertz? So 60 gigahertz, it is actually it has some unique characteristics, and it has high data rates which can be accomplished to get it in this spectrum, like V-band spectrum, and it provides continuous and less restricted bandwidth in terms of power, and all this can be done. So this band especially works on short range wireless communications. For calculating our noise figure, we used Friis formula. As seen in the formula, the Friis formula total noise figure is dependent on the noise figure of the LNA, as the first component of the receiver is LNA. So it is basically dependent on LNA and the noise figures of the subsequent blocks of the receiver. So variable gain has been set up. Why we choose variable gain is to make it used for different applications. And objectives. The main objective of our project is to design a LNA at V-band and centered at 60 gigahertz, and implement variable gain using body biasing and active loads. And our main parameters of interest are gain, noise figure, input output reflection coefficients, power consumption. Hello, can I continue? Yeah, I think. And input output reflection coefficients, power consumption, stability. And variable active load. So it is a diode connected load which we used in the active load to vary, like to vary the body bias of the, like the main transistor of body of the transistor, and vary the gain. And the main flowchart of our project. So firstly, when we want to design a LNA, we have to have our own specifications for the LNA we are designing, and select a MOSFET for that particular specification, so that the MOSFET is when the MOSFET is chosen, we can achieve our all specifications, and use the design the like we have many designs using cascoded or short degenerated, and all. And after that, we have to measure all our parameters of interest, like all the S parameters and noise figure, linearity, stability, and many. And if our measured parameters are okay, then we proceeded with body biasing, like to change a variable gain, or else we have to start from the beginning, like selection of, if our MOSFET is itself not good, then we get a problem. So we have to go first from the first step again. And the specifications of our LNA are S11 to be less than minus 10 dB, S12 minus 30 dB, and S21 the gain should be greater than 10, and S22 should be less than minus 10, and our noise figure should stay between 1 and 5, and stability should be greater than 1, and power consumption less than 20 milliwatts. And the suitable MOSFET which we choose for our projects that meets all our requirements is 65 nanometers CMOS. And topology, we used cascode configurations and measured all our parameters of interest. Then variable gain is achieved. So basically, we conducted two experiments. Firstly, we designed the conventional LNA. So designing which works at 60 gigahertz, centered at 60 gigahertz, and the suitable transistor is found and chosen, and it is the values of the MOSFET are tuned to get our values at 60 gigahertz. And the operating point of this cascode LNA is 4.64 milliamperes and 833 milliwatt. And by tuning the best width as it should be as small as possible, by tuning it well, and other parameters like all inductors, resistors, capacitances are tuned to get the desired values. Then for implementing variable gain, we used body biasing, where the body, that is the M1, is varied to get our desired parameters. Then for second thing, we used active load diode connected NMOS transistor. So for the body of the main MOSFET, a diode connected transistor is connected, and we varied the resistance. So variable resistance changes here. So body biasing is done again. So firstly, we used NMOS transistor, that is NMOS diode connector transistor, and we used the PMOS diode connector transistor to get all our desired parameters. And here, actually, one second. In the circuit, the source, the LS is used to match the impedance, and LG sets the resonance frequency. So for us, it should be at 60 gigahertz. So it is used to set the resonance frequency, and LD we used it to tune. All these have been used, and so these are our results. These are the results of our conventional LNA, where our S11 is less than -10, S12 is less than -30, S21 is also greater than 10, and S22 is also less than -10. So we got this. Current gain is greater than 10, and our noise figure for the conventional LNA is 1.099 dB, and stability is 193. As seen, we calculated the stability using the equation in the ADS software, stab_fact of S parameters. So it is calculated in that way, and variable gain using body biasing. For that, these are the results. Like our gain is maximum gain is same of the conventional LNA. This is the minimum gain. So we can vary from 7.123 gain to 10.969 gain by varying the body of the amplifying transistor. And then these are the noise figure. That is for the minimum values. These are the noise figure. 1.488, and stability is 139.778. And when we used active load, that is NMOS transistor, the minimum gain which we achieved was 7.048 without compromising on other parameters of interest. Other parameters are also as desired for our specifications of LNA. Then similarly, we calculated our noise figure and stability. Then we got the PMOS transistor, that is diode connected PMOS transistor, and here also the minimum gain is 7.016. So the maximum is as in the conventional LNA 10.969, and these are our S parameters, and our noise figure stability are also calculated. So firstly, power across our MOSFET is 4.64 milliwatts. The power is low because we used current reuse technique in the design, and minimum gain is 7.571 dB, and maximum is 10.969. The variable gain is designed so that when the power signal having high power, we can use the LNA with minimum gain, and vice versa can also be done. And our noise figure ranges from 1.09 dB to 3.293 dB. This low noise figure is because we use R bias in our circuit, which is very high value. So equivalent current noise is very small, so that we can ignore that. And our stability ranges from 193.264, that is maximum gain, to 470.920, that is due to during the minimum gain. And this is the comparison, like all the results have been tabulated. So for the conventional LNA, body biasing of M1, and diode connected to M1, and diode connected to PMOS, diode connected PMOS for the M1. The body of M1 is connected to diode connected transistor, and everything is put up into a table. So this is the table for that, and yeah, that's it from our end. Thank you.
Thank you. Am I audible?
Sir?
Am I audible?
Yeah, sir. Yeah, but very low.
Yeah, so this power dissipation, why did it reduce compared to the conventional LNA?
Sir, hello.
The power dissipation, when we look at
Yeah.
it, the conventional LNA has higher power dissipation. So any reason for that?
Presentation.
Power dissipation.
Okay, power consumption. Is that, sir?
Yes.
Yeah. One second.
So, the conventional LNA has higher power consumption than your table. Why is the power consumption reduced with the additional circuit? Any particular reason for that?
So you're asking us why is the power consumption is very low?
Yeah, why? Do you have any idea why? I'm just curious.
So because here we used a current reuse technique in the circuit. So when we use that technique, one second. Yeah, here where so the current is again being used as the common point is taken. The current is again being used. We got very less power consumption. That power consumption is across our drains, sir. Actually, we calculated the power consumption across the drain of our MOSFET. So that is low there.
And what are the typical width of these MOSFETs?
The circuit. Should I focus the circuit, sir?
Yeah,
Yeah.
the MOSFETs width and length. Is it 16 nanometer or can you use the higher?
It's 1 second. Yeah, I think it's big, right?
Yeah, what I need to ask is the MOSFETs which you have used.
Yeah.
Yeah, what is the width and the length of the MOSFETs?
So all the lengths of the MOSFET are as 65 nanometers. For all the MOSFETs are of 65 nanometers, and width of the this MOSFET, like MOSFET M1 is 160 and MOSFET 2 is 80, and this is just a small just like 5 nanometer, and that's it. The MOSFET 3.
So, yeah, we need to check whether it's 5 nanometer. Okay, that's all.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Our next presentation is by paper ID ICACC 93 by the title Freshness Estimator for Fruits and Vegetables using MQ Sensors. The authors of the presentation are Alanada Pranav S, Kaushal Kumar PR, Hariprakash J, Sharon S, and Ganesh. The presentation will be held online.
Sir, am I audible, sir?
Yeah, okay.
Is my screen visible, sir?
Yes, you can start.
Good afternoon to everyone. Our project is Freshness Estimator for Fruits and Vegetables using MQ Sensor. I, Balanaga Pranav S, on behalf of my team, represents this paper. So the main motive behind this project is to design a simple handheld low-cost device using Arduino and MQ sensors alone to estimate the freshness of fruits and vegetables in percentages. And this device can be sold in all the supermarkets and wherever there is a need for purchasing the fruits or vegetables. So the main aim of this project is to detect the methane gas concentration from fruits and vegetables, to detect the ethylene gas concentration from fruits and vegetables, and to design a handheld low-cost device that can estimate the freshness percentage of fruits and vegetables using the gained data from this methane gas concentration and ethylene gas concentration. So the main components which we have used in this project are Arduino Uno R3, which uses Atmega 328 processor, MQ4 methane gas sensor, MQ2 ethylene gas sensor, and infrared sensor that is used for object detection. When the fruit or vegetable comes into the proximity of the device, then the estimation process begins in the Arduino. The circuit diagram for a project is a simple circuit diagram where MQ2 sensor and MQ4 sensor are collected into analog ports, and an infrared module which returns the binary data zeros and ones if based on the object proximity that is connected to the digital pin, and all other pins are connected to the LCD display, 16x2 LCD display. And now this is the basic flow chart of the project. So whenever the device is turned on, initially at different places there will be different gas concentration as degrees of freedom is not confined. So here there is a requirement for us to determine the basic concentration that exists in that shop or in that area before the computation begins. So initially the MQ4 and MQ2 sensor will return the current gas readings or gas concentration of that particular area. This process will be like on a loop for around 2000 times. The data will be collected and it will be averaged, and that will be set as a threshold value. And based on that, now the IR sensor will begin. So if the IR sensor detects an object, then it will proceeds the computation towards the object detection. So now object detection has become true, and thus now these MQ2 sensor and MQ4 sensor will return the analog data pertaining to that particular fruit or vegetable, and both of those analog data will be added, because here we are using ethylene and methane as a basic gas component, because ethylene will be generated only during the ripening process of the fruits or vegetables, and methane will be produced during the rotting of the fruits or vegetables. So taking into consideration, less than 20% of the fruits or vegetables will be rotted in a supermarket or any other departmental store. So since both the analog data are added, it will be before adding, it will be converted into analog voltage signals, and then it will be added. And since, as I told, only 20% of the fruits or vegetables will be producing methane due to its decomposition process of microbes. And ethylene will be generated in a sequential manner, and thus there will be dominancy in the ethylene concentration. So whenever a fruit or vegetable is getting rotten or ripe or over ripened, and during that process methane will be produced at very higher concentration, giving us a hope to print not to not consume this particular food. And based on this particular gained analog value, added analog value, here the level was the initial threshold which was detected. And as I told, MQ2 sensor and MQ4 sensor, MQ2 sensor will detect ethylene, but it will have other properties, like it has a property to detect other gases, like it can detect smoke, it can detect LPG, it can detect ethylene gas, and much more other gases in its smaller concentrations. Whereas MQ4 is specially designed for methane alone. So here there is a parameter called 90, which is subtracted from the original threshold to confine the search only on the ethylene gas. And whenever the current predicted analog value raises beyond this level minus 90, then it will calculate the percentage of freshness. And once it is calculating the percentage of freshness, it will print the percentage. It will print the percentage in the LCD display. Whereas if it is not, if this do not satisfy this condition, then it will print do not consume, because obviously a rotten food cannot be consumed, right? So again, the system reset process will happen, and it will continue this entire process. This is the freshness equation which we have developed. So here we are computing how much percentage of food is not, how much percentage is not good to eat. Like we are detecting ethylene and methane, which is a parameter for not freshness, which is a parameter for a food which is not fresh. So we are converting it into a percentage and subtracting from 100, so that we will get the percentage of freshness. So here as I told, from the detected level, the level minus 90 will be subtracted, and considering the threshold to be level, we are multiplying it with 100 to get its percentage and subtracting it to 100 to get the percentage of freshness of that particular fruits or vegetables. And now for this project, we have chosen 3 different fruits or vegetables, and 2 fruits and 1 common vegetable. It was a mango season when I have done this project, so mango was in peak. So I have collected the samples of mango. Banana is a common fruit that is available everywhere, and tomato is a basic food vegetable that is used all over the world. So as far as our research concerned, we have concentrated just only on these 3 fruits or vegetables, but this study can be elongated to all the fruits or vegetables. based on the research that we'll be performing the next paper. So here the mango which we choose was fresh, without any damage, and banana which we have choose was moderately fresh, and we have chosen a rotten tomato. And now on the analysis part, the left side and right side images are the device which we have designed. And this is the general trend which we have obtained before measuring the device. That is the threshold ppm versus time. So when you check this graph, it is around 185.1, which is less than 200. And now when we have tested this for this fresh mango, and it was around 190, which is also again less than 200, but it has a difference of 10. And this difference will be taken and will be converted into percentage, and it will be subtracted from 100, and it gave as the percentage of freshness around 99.69%, which matched with the original chosen mango, that is the fresh mango. And now when we come to the moderately fresh banana, it had a reading around 199 ppm, and which is almost close to 200, indicating that percentage of freshness will be reduced. And here it showed 78.75% fresh, the banana. And when we chose a rotten tomato, as I told, methane will not be produced in every stage. Since we are adding the analog signals, methane will be a non-periodic robustness in the graph because the bacterial activity is not periodic, and sometimes it will emit methane and sometimes it may not emit methane. That is why there is a graphical fluctuation which is shown here, and which have already crossed 200 in its very early stage itself, and thus reducing its percentage of freshness below 20 and indicating the customer that do not consume this particular fruit or vegetable. And based on our observation, we found that the tomato was very high in concentration when compared to other banana, mango and fresher. So here we gave a bar comparison where the light orange color represent the fruit or vegetable, and the orange color represent the general trend of the air which is present in that atmosphere. And as the comparison shows, the mango is slightly lower than the fruit. The mango is slightly higher than the general trend, banana is slightly higher than the general trend, and tomato is far more higher than the general trend. These MQ sensor will return the gas concentration as voltage signals. So whenever there is a high gas concentration, the voltage signal will be around 5 volts, very high concentration. That stage will be around 5 volts. And based on this analysis, we have given a table in here. So mango was around 190 ppm and percentage of freshness was around 99.69%, and it is a high edible fruit. And banana was around 199, which reduces the percentage of freshness to 78.75%, and it is quoted as moderately edible. And tomato was around 572.3, which also produced methane gas. So it reduces the percentage below 20, and which should be printed in the LCD display, do not consume, and thus it is not edible food. So these are the results. The general trend of ppm versus the time was less than the saturation limit, so it was 185.1, and here it was 190, 199, and 572.3, and saturation limit was 200 ppm. And the conclusion for this project is this device can be implemented in all supermarkets products, and Arduino can be used for effective analysis of the freshness of fruits and vegetables, because Arduino has 6 analog ports, and here we are using 2 analog ports and 1 digital port. And Arduino Nano has low flash memory, and thus we have chose Arduino Uno because of its low cost and availability of analog ports. And in the future scope of this project, we can use a monocular camera along with MQ sensors to include image processing also to give even more accurate percentage of freshness of this particular fruits or vegetables. Thank you.
Thank you, Pranav. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Yeah. So, a couple of questions. First of all, you have these 2 sensors, right?
Yes, sir.
So, these 3 levels which you are saying, is it for both the sensors, or how are you combining the outputs from both the sensors?
Yes, sir. So there will be in the Arduino code I have written as analog read of one sensor, analog read A0 of one sensor, A1 of one sensor, and here it will be both added and it will be both added in the program, and it will be converted into voltage signal, and then it will be converted into ppm.
So basically, this is the you are summing up the voltage levels from both the sensors and
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Because methane burst will not occur periodically. So here we can conserve the computation cost also by adding both the signals.
Another thing, so you have compared fresh mango, moderately fresh banana, and rotten tomato. So do you have any reading for fresh tomato?
I can't hear you properly, sir. Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, so you have checked the outputs for fresh mango, moderately fresh banana, and rotten tomato.
Yes,
Right?
sir.
So have you compared these readings with, let's say, fresh tomato and rotten tomato, and how different is the readings?
Yes, sir. We have actually collected around 10 to 15 samples of each fruits or vegetables which we have used. And for each vegetables, we have run around 2000 loops of computation in the board. And then we have came to a conclusion of that 90 threshold value. And based on that, to predict this properly, I have used these particular methods like fruit, fresh mango, moderately fresh banana, and tomato. And of course, yes, it is true. We can use any of this. Moderately fresh mango will also show the same thing, moderately fresh, and we can also use any combination of this moderately fresh, not to be, and fresh of these fruits and vegetables.
No, why
And
I ask this, so all these, when they are fresh, they are going to give almost identical readings, is that so? And all, let's say you have fresh mango and fresh banana and fresh tomato, are all the readings going to be the same? Or same in the sense,
no, readings will not be the same. No, readings will not be the same because every fruits and vegetables will produce different amount of ethylene, but below the threshold only. But these particular small difference will also be converted into a great percentage. As I shown in the earlier cases, it was around 10 difference and 1 difference. So for that, it reduced from 99 to 78%. So which means that every fruits and vegetables will not provide same amount of concentration, thus do not provide the same readings, but though it will produce a result pertaining to that amount of ethylene generated.
yeah, but all of them will remain in the, if they are fresh, they will remain within that, that's what it's.
Your voice is not audible.
Means all the fruits when they are fresh, their readings will be within that base level which you are considering. Is that so?
All the fruits and vegetables, if it is good, then it will show the percentage of freshness for that particular fruit or vegetable, and then it will tell you that the food is good to eat. Whereas if there is some amount of methane detected, which means there is some bacterial or microbial activity found in that fruit or vegetable, so which will return the value to be below 20%, and it will print do not consume the food. So this particular model can be implemented in all these three fruits in any combinations.
Okay, thank you, Pranav.
Thank you.
Our next presentation is by the paper ID ICACC 102 by the title Two-Speed Modified Radix, 4-Boot Multiplier with Different Adder Configuration. The authors are Reshma Levy and Adarsh Vila.
Good afternoon, all. Myself Reshma Vicky. So first of all, thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to present my project topic, two-speed modified graphics movement multiplier with different adder configuration. My paper is also authored by Adarsh Vila. So my paper ID is 102. Your application is not your institution. Then I'm from Computational College. PLS and the Multiplication is an essential basic function in arithmetic operation. So it dominates the most of the execution time in DSP algorithms, image processing, neural networks, and all. So there should be a need for high-speed multipliers. Then multiplication, actually it is a mathematical operation of adding an integer by specified number of times. So it has two operands, multiplicand and multiplier. So the intermediate results are called the partial products and the final result are called product. So multiplier, an efficient multiplier should have some following characteristics. It should operate with high speed, it should consume less number of slices of integers, and it should consume less power, and it should give the correct result. So modified Booth algorithm. The algorithm used for this multiplication or this multiplier is the modified Booth algorithm, or simply a radix for Booth algorithm. So one of the main advantages of using this modified Booth algorithm or radix for is that we can reduce the number of partial products into half. So here, instead of flipping and adding to every column for the multiplier time, we are taking only the second column and we are multiplying with the +1, -1, +2, -2, and 0 of the multiplier term to produce the same results. So there are some steps to perform the radix for recorded multiplier bits. First step, we need to append 0 to the multiplier bits. Then second step, we need to group the multiplier by bits by overlapping technique. Then third, we need to find out the partial product as per the radix for Booth recording table. And fourth one, we need to find out the partial product addition by using various arrays. So this is the 3-bit pairing and Booth recording table as per the radix for Booth algorithm. So this is a 2-speed multiplier. This is an n-bit 2-speed multiplier which skips the all one and all zero computation and computationally adds the non-zero encoded parts of the multiplication. So actually this 2-speed multiplier is a modified version of serial Booth multiplier whose data path is divided into two subcircuits having two critical delays called tau and theta. So that is for zero encodings, it will operate with a particular delay, and for non-zero encoding, it will operate with another delay. So that's why I call it 2-speed. So here we are using two optimization. First of all, first optimization is that we are assigning a multiplier bit into a product register so that we don't need any extra register for storing the multiplier bits. And then second one is that we are eliminating the realignment of fluctuations by accumulating the partial product into the product register. So for each cycle, we are constructing the 3 LSBs of the multiplier bits, and a decision is carried out whether it is zero encoding or non-zero encoding. And this is distinguished by generating a skip signal. That is, when my skip signal is equal to 1, it is for all one and all zero encodings, and when my skip signal is equal to 0, it is for non-zero encodings. So there is a control circuit which is used to find out whether it is a non-zero encoding and zero encoding. So the control circuit consisting of two counters, counter 1 and counter 2, then 3 gates to identify the non-zero encodings and a comparator. The counter 1 accumulates the number of encoding the counting process, and counter 2 is used to count the number of cycles needed for the addition, that is non-zero encodings. So this is an example of an encoding process. First of all, we need to append a 0 to the multiplier bit. Then for each cycle, we are constructing 3 bits. So for the first cycle, my LSBs are 0, 0, 0, which means that a 0 encoding. So which generate a skip action with the time tau. For the next cycle, my 3 LSBs are 1, 1, 0, which is a non-zero encodings, which will generate an add action with the time tau plus k bar tau. For the third cycle, my LSBs are 0, 0, 1. This is also a non-zero encoding, which will generate an add action with the total time tau plus 2 k bar of tau. And for my fourth cycle, the LSB is 1, 0, 0. This is also a non-zero encoding, which will generate an add action with the time 3 tau plus 3 k bar of tau. And my fifth cycle, it is 1, 1, 1, that is zero encoding that is generating a skip action with the total time needed for this encoding process will be 2 tau plus 3 k bar tau. So the proposed two-speed multiplier with different adder configuration. So as we all know that adders plays a crucial role in partial product addition. So for speeding up the existing two-speed multiplier, what I am doing is I have proposed different adder configuration. I am implementing the two-speed multiplier and it is compared in terms of delay and area. So the adder configuration that I have taken is basic adder, adder with carry in and carry out, triple carry adder, and a carry skip adder. So first one is the basic adder. So basic adder is the most basic adder configuration with 2 inputs and 1 output. Say my inputs are A and B and the output is C. The operation can be defined as C is equal to A plus B and we can use n number of bits. Here we are using 32 bits. So this is a second one is the adder with carry in and carry out. So this adder is simply referred as full adder circuit with 3 inputs A, B, carry in and 2 outputs, sum and star. So the Boolean expression for this adder can be defined as sum is equal to A XOR B XOR C and star is equal to AB plus BC plus AC. So third one is triple carry adder. So actually this triple carry adder is a digital adder circuit for using multiple full adders to create a n-bit numbers. For 32-bit triple carry adder, I have 32-bit full adder circuits. So the carry generated from the one full adder is rippled through the next full adder and so on. So that we call it a ripple carry adder. The fourth adder I have taken is carry skip adder. So for an n-bit carry skip adder consists of an n-bit ripple carry adder, then there will be a AND gate and the max. Then there is an n-bit propagate term generation which is produced by the XORing input A and B, and then output of the propagate term generation is given to the AND gate, and from that AND gate, output of the AND gate is given to the select line as max. Then we are obtaining the output Cout. So this is the output of 32-bit two-speed multiplier. Here IA is my multiplier and IB is the multiplier and OC is the product. So this is the RTL schematic of 32-bit two-speed multiplier. Comparison. So the two-speed multiplier and comparing the two-speed multiplier with different adder configurations in terms of delay and number of slice intervals. From this comparison, we can see that the adder with carry and carry out adder will be the best and much better than the existing system for this two-speed multiplier in terms of delay and area. So this is the graphical analysis of TSM with respect to delay and area. So conclusions, we are proposing a two-speed multiplier with different adder configurations. So and I'm comparing it in the terms of area and delay. So from the simulation results of comparison, the best suited adder configuration for the two-speed multiplier will be a full adder circuit with a delay of 4.770 nanoseconds and with 142 slices of this is much better than the existing system in terms of delay and area. So the future work can be made in terms of higher variances in this stage. And these are the references. And thank you for your attention.
So, what is the difference between this basic adder and adder carry?
So basic adder we are just having only 2 inputs and 1 output. We are not constructing the carry.
Yeah, but there is a big number.
Yes. Actually, the hardware actually have one module for that basic adder. 2 input and 1 output only.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
You are implementing everything very well. So in the second case, when you want basically to create so B equals B, so if B is A, B and C are single bit.
No, the
Need to check that.
actually the hardware like
Yeah, it's harder to place in the second one than the better. But
Our next presentation is by the paper ID ICACC 129 by the title Memristor-based Durable Negative Group Delay Circuit. The authors of the presentation are Chitra Paul, Sridhar R.K., Dr. Niti Das Krishna, and Kavita Ji.
Good evening. My topic for presentation is memristor-based durable negative group delay circuit. And the motivation behind this is with the advent of new wireless technologies, we highly demand high quality signal transmission. So in order to ensure the quality, we not only require signal amplitude characteristics, we need to attend the phase characteristics of the signal. For frequency dependent devices such as mixers, amplifiers, etc., phase non-linearities can occur. And these phase non-linearities can generate positive group delays, which will further make invisible interference and thus deteriorating the signal transmission. So a solution for this particular generation of positive group delays, one among those solutions is to develop a group delay equalization method. And we have used to design a negative group delay circuit towards this method. And we have utilized the band stop structures in order to design negative group delay circuit. And there are different types of transmission line based band stop structures. One among that is a resonator feed line coupling band stop filter shown in the first figure. And the second type is a stub loaded or a resonator loaded band stop filter. And the third one is we can put defections on the microstrip structure so that it will generate negative group delays. And we have used the third method here. And I'm moving on to the NGD circuit design. So initially, we designed a 50 ohm transmission line on FR4 substrate with epsilon r 4.7 and a height 1.6 millimeter. And in order to calculate the group delay feature, we know the group delay of a signal is the derivative of the phase response. And here minus d by d omega angle of S21 means the phase of transmission coefficient. So after designing 50 ohm transmission line, we plotted the group delay following this equation. And as you can see, the phase nonlinear phase is constant here. And in order to generate negative group delays into the generate negative group delays into the 50 ohm transmission line, we etched L and U shaped stubs on the 50 ohm line. So as you can see, there are stubs being generated at the cell and U-shaped stubs are there. And they are disturbing the current distribution passing through the 50 ohm transmission line. So when it disturbs it, it generates three negative group delays at three resonant frequencies. That is at 1.9 gigahertz, 3.4 gigahertz, and 5.7 gigahertz. And over here, after that, we did the parametric analysis in order to get the optimum lengths of these stubs. And as you can see from the graph, as length decreases, resonant frequency increases. And the center frequencies are determined by the lengths of the stubs. And the group delays will get shifted with the frequencies generated. And the optimum lengths we obtained is L1 equal to 11.2 and L2 equal to 10.7 millimeter. And over here, the group delays are fixed. They are not tunable. In order to bring tunability to the group delays, we introduced memristors. So memristor is basically a tunable fourth fundamental circuit element, and it is a passive device which provides a functional relationship between flux and charge. As we all know, there are four fundamental circuit variables: voltage, current, flux, and charge. And for these four possible four circuit variables, there can be 6 possible relations. And one relation was defined by the memristor. And its equation is given by m of memristor is given by m of q, and its electrical symbol is shown in the figure. And there are different memristor types, and the first one over here is titanium dioxide sandwiched between 2 platinum electrodes. This is even though the memristor idea was postulated in 1971, the first memristor was found only by first prototype of the memristor was done only by the year 2008 by HP Labs. And this has a switch, and it can vary from resistance 100 ohm to 100 kilo ohm. During on stage is 100 ohm, and during off stage it was 100 kilo ohm. It was of nano scale size. And another memristor which found in literature is the first RF memristor. And here this first RF memristor acts as a switch only. And during on stage, it will be having a 3.6 ohm, and during off stage 1.4 femtofarad. And it has a wide frequency coverage area for the switch, that is from 10 megahertz to 110 gigahertz, and it is of nano scale size. And another memristor is NOEM memristor, and it is basically a metal ion conduction based device, and its conductivity depends upon the movement of silver ions into the channel within the active layer. And here it acts as a linear resistor, that is the resistance varies from 400 ohm to 1 mega ohm, and its size is 1 micrometer by 1 micrometer. So as we can see from these 3 memristor can either act as a linear resistor or as a switch. So here what we have used is, we have connected a memristor across this slot, and here the memristor is not acting as a switch, it is acting as a linear resistor. And we vary the resistances from 1 kilo ohm to 10 kilo ohms, and at the respective frequencies, for example at 2.1 gigahertz, as you can see, the group delay got increased from minus 0.65 nanosecond till 3.7 nanosecond. Similar scenario appears for the rest of the frequencies. So the main aim of our circuit is that when positive phase nonlinearities occur, positive group delays get generated. So with the help of this particular circuit, we can compensate those positive group delay circuits as required by tuning the resistance of the memristor. And if we can vary the lengths of the stubs, furthermore we can tune the resonant frequencies also. And towards the conclusion, actually we have used LNU shaped stubs on 50 of transmission line to generate negative group delay. And further to bring about tunability, we connected memristor connection across the slot. And as a future work, what we are planning to do is, we are doing the frequency tuning into these NGD circuit with the help of memristors, and we are trying to fabricate this frequency tunable NGD tunable circuit. And these are the references. Thank you. No, in order to experimentally verify, what we are doing is that we are taking we got some SMD resistors, and we are placing soldering those SMD resistors in place of these memristors. Actually, we have got that is a question. Yes, we need a programming circuitry for it, but it is in the area research area